Service and Public Safety Committee meeting to order. Today's Monday, September 18th. And Kim, are we in FOIA compliance?
Yes.
Thank you. And will you please join me in Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you. And can we get a motion to adopt the agenda, please?
Second.
All in favor? Right hand. And approval of the minutes. We have 3 meetings, August 7th, 2023, August 21st, 2023, September 5th, 2023. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Right hand. And are there any, is there anyone in attendance who would like to speak to an item that is not on our agenda today? Seeing none, we'll move on to unfinished business. And we have a discussion of an appointment of a Town of Hilton Head Island representative on the Military Enhancement Committee of Beaufort County. Josh is going to present that, although I don't see him right this minute. This is a matter that we've reviewed previously and we sent to Town Council for discussion. That's now back before us. So,
I'll pop in and get it. Matt,
okay.
time to pop in.
I think so. And if it's inconvenient for him right this second, we understand that. Everyone's busy. We could move on to the next item if there would be no objection to that. Is the next, well, the next item we don't need Josh for? Does that work then?
Yeah, right.
Can we move? Ryan. We could. Go ahead and move on, Kim, you think?
Yeah, and then we can just come back.
All right, if there are no objections, then we would like to welcome Major Jeff Purdy to the podium to give the report from the Sheriff's Department and the quarterly statistics for Hilton Head Island. Oh, I hear him.
Let's put back in the back.
Welcome. Thank you.
Got another PowerPoint, a little different than the one that's up. It's got the same information, but maybe a little more palatable. Good morning. Appreciate y'all having us here this morning. This is the second quarter report for the town of Hilton Head. Crimes against persons. The second quarter, this quarter compared to last quarter in 2022, the murders are down 1, aggravated assaults are up 4, robberies are up 2, and the area, the aggravated assault, it seems like they're all in one area. We're steady working on those. Same thing as last year. If you look at the numbers from last year, I think one of you folks asked me to kind of compare these to last year's events other than quarter for quarter. So looking at last year, we're up a little bit, but it's the same area. And we're working on it, and we've been steady working on it. The robberies are scattered across Hilton Head. It's not specifically one area, so I can't really narrow those down and give you some exact locations for those because they're all separate.
What is that area?
As far as the
Assaults.
assaults, a lot of them, 5 out of the 24 are in the area of Southwood. Okay, Southwood Park Drive, and then 3 of them are in the area of Squire Pope. So that's a good chunk of those, and the rest of those are scattered out. And I'll go back to the robberies. Those are all over the place. I say all over the place. One is at Southwood. We've got one on Torellis Court, Main Street, and in the Walmart area. So those are kind of scattered out a little bit.
When we see the statistics like that, and just listening to you describe where they occurred, could it possibly be that within that one crime or that one event, that 2 different crimes are being committed, and so we see one event broken up to 2 different categories, a robbery that included an assault or something along those lines as an example?
It could, and a larceny as well. It could. Yes, ma'am.
So these aren't necessarily all individual events. They could be. Thank you.
Just try to lighten things up a little bit. We've got a new canine here with the sheriff's office, Pridewind. He's been assigned to Sergeant Swinehammer. He works on Hilton Head, Bluffton, predominantly Hilton Head and Bluffton. However, he's all over the county, but he's our latest addition to the sheriff's office. I thought you might want to see that. And I think last time, Mr. Brown, you asked why we didn't bring the dogs here or have those folks come to these meetings. When we bring these animals out to different events, it's usually upon a request. So if anybody wants to request to see some of the canines, the bloodhounds, or any of the other special teams or special equipment we have, it's always on request. But again, there's Pridewind. He's our latest addition to the sheriff's office. He's a patrol canine. He rides around in a patrol car for 12 hours a shift with his handler, Sergeant Swinehammer, and he'll detect. He's a drug dog as well as a tracking dog.
From my perspective as chair, and everyone's welcome to join in, but we would welcome Officer K9 Pridewind to our chambers anytime for one of my meetings. It's an open invitation. As important as everyone who stands on 2 feet.
Yes, ma'am.
Bertie, trying to like the conversation more trying to suggest that Pridewind is someone that the community respects and understands versus just this committee. Okay, mentioned a few areas that we've seen some consistency in crime. All right, and I guess the challenge to us all is how do we start to generationally change the attitude so that we understand that Pridewind is a servant of the community that is here to help versus somebody that's just going to be chasing me when I do something wrong. Okay, so that's kind of where my mind was as far as introducing fine officers to our community.
All right, switch on over to property crimes. Compared to last year, this quarter, we're down a little bit on the burglaries. We're down a lot on the larcenies, as you can see, and the auto thefts remain the same. The auto thefts, as I dug down a little bit on those, we'll start with those. There were actually 12 of those were vehicles. The other ones were golf carts or electric vehicles, and many, if not all of them, have been recovered. A lot of them have been recovered. And you compare it to the last year as well. I think we're looking pretty good on the burglaries, the larcenies, and the auto thefts are about the same. I would imagine a big question is why is there such a drop in the larcenies? Well, a lot of those were car break-ins, and I dig back into last year and the year before, we had a rash of car break-ins, and they just continued to break into these unsecured vehicles. So I'm hoping that people are starting to lock their vehicles more and hide items that are important to other people that people like to go out there and take. So the time of opportunity, I'm hoping that's the answer, but I can't tell you for sure, but it's nice to see the drop. This is we've got a new handler with the current dog we have. Rig is our explosive dog. Rig's got a new handler. He's with Lance Corporal Gavin Diadamo. He was reassigned to him recently. And they do a lot of stuff on Hilton Head. They do the airport routinely for explosives. They do parades, they do the schools, they do businesses. The Heritage was a big event. They spent a lot of time out there. But Lance Corporal Diadamo is assigned to Hilton Head, and that dog goes with him everywhere he goes. And if he's called out to respond to something to do with an explosive, he handles it, as well as a cadaver, he'll handle that as well.
I believe, if I'm wrong, correct me, but I believe he was at Celebration Park.
Yes. He was.
Thank you.
Collisions. I know collisions is a big deal because there's so many of them. If you look at the numbers from last quarter, we're up a little bit. Second quarter, there's more. I think there's a lot more people coming to Hilton Head than in the first quarter, but we're up a little bit there. The injuries, to me, I think that's a big consideration. Injuries, it remained the same. But the collisions, there's a lot of them here on Hilton Head, and I could attest to that because the last quarter I was rear-ended here on the island as well. I'm very fortunate I didn't end up in that injury category, but there are many wrecks over here. Over to the fatalities, we had a fatality in the second quarter. It was actually one wreck with 2 fatalities. Individuals backed up into a lagoon and didn't get out. It was and then compared to the last years and the last quarter in January, we had another fatality. A pedestrian was walking across the road and got run over, but numbers are relatively.
I'm sorry, if I could ask a question before, can you go back one slide?
For the monthly?
To the year over year. First of all, thank you for doing year over year. I think I asked about that. But can you tell us something about the locations of most collisions? I have my notes from the fourth quarter report of last year, and it looked as though the most frequent locations were between Drive and Matthews, and I just wondered.
I looked at the location. There's so many of them. When I do a pin map on it, you saw it last time I presented. It was all over the place. The most wrecks are on 278, obviously, because that's where the most traffic is. And bear with me one second.
I see, and this might be helpful in your packet. There's also a fairly detailed, very detailed list of collision, where it was located and type of injury that may have been sustained during that event.
Yes, thanks. I was get to something like that because we'd ask a question about the larcenies and assaults.
The best I can give you, the majority of the wrecks are around Squire Pope Island, and then they're going to be around the traffic circle and Palmetto Bay Road on the other side. That's where it seems like most of the wrecks occur.
Rear ends or T-bone coming into the side and angled aside from turn.
Try and find out for you and let you know.
Curious as to how our once we get it up and running and finalize and calculate data, how our new adaptive traffic signal system may or may work with our town staff in analyzing that. I think it needs to be after the end of this year because we won't have data for that until the end of the
Citations. In April, they're up a little bit. May, they're down. In June, they're up. The warnings are down across the board for this quarter compared to last year. I just, again, thought this would be something nice. This is one of our deputies, PFC Zachary Lepore, after our calls for service, he went out and met with some folks in our community. Lemonade. Back to business, calls for service. Looks like we're down a little bit on the calls for service this quarter compared to the first quarter and compared to last year. Excuse me, up from the first quarter and down a little bit last year. Our incident reports are up. Our arrests are up. Our 309s are down, and our post and door hangers are down.
Under 309s.
309s are self-reporting traffic reports. If it's a very minor fender bender, if you will, and it's under $1,000, we'll give a 309. It's self-reporting system.
Regard to the calls for service, just curious anecdotally, do you think that any of the additional, with the short-term rental ordinance, the fact that we have a director of public safety and additional code enforcers, is that helping? Is that complementing the work that you guys are being called in to ask to do routinely?
I think without question it's helping, but as far as does it affect these numbers, I don't know that.
Yeah, just curious. I know that they're doing a great job, and I think the two working together is a positive influence over the town,
I agree.
as well as folks stopping for lemonade. I think that interaction with our citizens is fantastic. Thanks.
Beach patrol over the summer, you're gonna look at the numbers on the town ordinances. There weren't a whole lot of tickets and citations out on the beach. Our goal to be out on the beach is to help educate and have these people that come to visit Hilton Head enjoy their time there. Lance Corporal Jacob Klaus was out there working it, doing a good deed and cleaning up some litter. Somebody took some pictures of that, and I thought it was a good deed. And again, I go back to educating and having these folks that are coming here and people that live here enjoying the natural resources that we have is key. We want them to do it safely. In addition to patrol, we also have the special events that we're all aware of. One of the resources we have in addition to the explosive dog and the cadaver dog is the bomb unit. Spent a lot of time out at the Heritage. Was a successful one. We had to dive the marina out there and had our Marine Patrol out there as well, providing safety and security for the community. Some other events. We do a lot of events. I think someone asked me to give a number of how many events we go to and we present ourselves at. I don't have that number because there's so many people in the agency that go different ways and do it. It's going to be tough. These are some of the folks that work directly for us on Hilton Head. Sergeant Rickabine is on Hilton Head most of the time. I got Danny Allen is on Hilton Head quite a bit of time. He's out in the community working with the Rotary Club. And then we've got Sergeant Aarons, who's out there with one of the schools on Hilton Head. These guys are actually on Hilton Head doing stuff, not only to try to protect the people here, but to try to engage.
Very much. Are there any additional questions from the committee? Yes, Betsy.
Yes, here's my every time you're here question until I get an answer. Sheriff also reported to the full town council during this year, but the constituents I hear from most often are concerned about speeding. Both here from where I live on the north end of the island, keeping 5 miles per hour on William Parkway, car flew by me right near Shelter Cove Lane, the satellite office is. So the question I've got for the folks who ask me is, what are you doing about speeding? Ask for some data, particularly about citations or tickets, whatever they're called here. Like some data about that.
Well, in addition to the patrolling that we do day in and day out on here, where the guys are specifically assigned here and the other folks on the road, we've opened it up extra duty for guys to come in on their days off to run traffic. We do it in 6-hour blocks a couple of days a week. They are doing that, they're actively doing that, and that's what we're doing to try to. Brought some red light issues to our attention where people are running red lights.
Also me.
That's the same. We've got these guys coming in on their day off to work. I'm working on it.
Okay. Next time you give a report, can we have more specific information about that?
As far as speeding and
Yeah, like number of tickets or, the number of hours that you're actually patrolling, looking for speeding. Have, I know sometimes on the Cross Island Parkway, there's somebody sitting, one of your cars sitting there watching for folks who are speeding. Haven't seen as much on William Hilton Parkway, but definitely on the Cross Island. So I'm not asking you to reveal your location so people know where they are, but more data about what you're doing to enforce that. Because there's a lot of concern by residents on this island.
back to driving.
So on the page within the document that refers to tickets and warnings, I would assume, and it's an assumption, that these are road infractions, speeding, distracted driving, the rest, or these relate to tickets also on the beach and the rest?
These typically, most of these deal with traffic violations, not all of them, but most of them do. Traffic tickets or warnings that go through the ticket system.
Thank you. Appreciate that statistic.
There was a drop in May, year over year. In May, there was 207 tickets, and in 2020. Behaving better, I don't know.
Well, I would say that people are likely behaving better. Thank you, Alex. I dropped my cap, it's my water. But I think it also is the impact of having the additional on the road and a focus towards that. We appreciate it. Steve?
As I mentioned to Major Purdy earlier, I had an official encounter with Sergeant Aaron, and I wanted very professional, helpful, patient.
Thank you. Thank you for your.
We appreciate the information. Forward to seeing you next time.
Yeah. Thank you. I see that Josh is with us now, so thank you everyone for your patience as we kind of jumped out of order. But Josh, we'd like to welcome you to discuss the first item on our agenda, which was the military Enhancement Committee. That was the word I was going to say.
Yes, good morning. Appreciate the opportunity to chat with you today. This is a continuation of a discussion we started at your meeting last month with regards to a request that the town received to appoint a representative to the Beaufort County Military Enhancement Committee. At the last meeting, members of the committee asked if we could obtain a copy of the current bylaws of the organization, any other organizational information, and then particularly any information about the financial contributions, if any, that are required to participate in this organization. So staff went and obtained copies of that information. It's included in the backup materials that are before you today. And then we've got a summary within the staff report. And so with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have, but hopefully we've been able to bring back the information that the committee was seeking from the last meeting.
Would be a representative that we authorize our town manager or mayor to appoint.
The mayor would appoint.
Mayor would appoint. Thank you. Steve, any questions? No? Patsy? Alex? No questions? Okay. And what would you like for us with regard to this item
Ultimately,
today?
if the committee is supportive of this request, to recommend to town council to pursue making such an appointment, or if the committee has concerns or reservations, to raise those up to council as well. But either way, to take this request to town council for policy direction to staff.
And if there are no objections, then can we get a motion to do that, to take this item and move it forward to the town council for further consideration? All in favor? Thank you, Josh.
stay here for the next item.
Okay. And next.
Yep, nope, you're right where you need to be.
Okay, go ahead. I was going to describe it, but I think.
Oh, please, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
So yes, again, this is a continuing discussion that we've had for some time now with regards to implementing a parking management program. We've had Mac DeFord, who was with us and now is working externally, but still assisting on this project. And so he had come before you last month to make a presentation, had included a draft ordinance, and I know he's been working closely with the committee to try to address some of the questions and or requests that had come up as part of the last meeting. And so at this point, I'd like to turn the presentation over to him and let him kind of provide a summary of what work he's done since the last time he met with you, and then tee up that discussion to move forward.
Thank you. Welcome.
Don't have very many operational updates other than in your package, you did receive information, data that's been gathered. It's about probably a little bit less than a month from August or so through Labor Day. And so I want to go through that information in more depth. We have Quinto guy. So if you have any questions about that or you want to discuss, we can do that. I won't go through the operational aspect of these slides. Nothing has changed since the last update that we have provided. Right into the policy overview, which changes back that I've received from some of you and nothing here in the introduction. So I can just go through it again if you want me to start. Purpose and intent and go through each section of the ordinance, or we can go into the change.
What would the committee prefer?
Overview?
I would say just the changes would be good for me.
Okay.
Changes are fine.
All the highlighted text, primarily three areas within the last conversation that was defining what a resident is. And the material package that we've given you, there was the resolution that was passed by not that long ago that defines what a resident is. Parking pass, so any person who owns any single or multi, that's irrespective of whether the person qualifies for that 4%. Person who is a tenant for a lease of a single or multifamily residence. Any person who owns a timeshare interest totaling more than 183 days. So that is what we would propose as the definition for resident. And again, each residence would have a limit to 2 parking passes per.
183 is like what I would call 6 months, like half a year. 5 divided by 2.
And this is the same, just to make sure everyone who's listening, this is the same definition. We're being consistent. We haven't changed the definition of a resident from what we used with Islanders Beach or
Resolution 2205. And definition straight out of the resolution. So the only thing to mention here for 12-5-5, take out the table in the ordinance. So practical purposes, website, parking areas will be marked. Okay, hours of operation. I know that we talked about this and kind of spurred staff's gathering of a lot of the data. What we have worked based on some of the conversations I've had is allowing the town manager to for paid parking with the consent of town council, which would be formalized. So that allows, I think, hours of operation and then under penalties and fines, we had discussed last time there are other conversation around late fees, a $25 late fee of being applied to any original fine being issued. So arbitrary number, we can change that. Those are the only changes that we draft ordinance. I know that there was some discussion about beach parking passes, resident parking passes, and parking passes, so that I would need a little bit more information or guidance. Structure this ordinance to account for parking passes. Those are the modifications that
questions?
Can you discuss a little further
so the
who is this,
sorry,
who is it for?
resident parking passes, business. So that would be essentially for businesses that area. I mean, there are different ways. Parking area qualify for a parking pass.
intended to benefit? Is it for the employees of?
My understanding, yes, based on the feedback I received, it would park and not have to pay for parking as they're coming to.
Intended to benefit anybody else in the business community? Employees of the nearby stores?
I mean, I think it would benefit the larger sense of employees are going to be staffed.
At the list of the paid parking areas in the draft ordinance, Fish Hall Beach, Castnet Drive, Chaplain Park, Dreesen, Folly Field, Islanders, Alder Lane, and Clugney. It seems like, unless I'm missing businesses that may be located in those areas, that the only one it'd be applicable to would be Clugney.
It could be structured as such so that parking passes would only be.
Alex?
Go ahead, I'll wait.
I was going to say, based on the PCI, I guess PCI put together the information on Clugney Beach Park. It was just, had some anecdotal data last time. I appreciate the actual data about when that parking lot at Clugney Beach Park is full. Certainly on the weekends, I'm looking at for the limited data we have, and especially Labor Day weekend. So perhaps there's some space available there, but I think it needs to be data-driven. And follow-up question is, do we have a specific request from merchants in the parking, and how many spaces? Yeah, go.
Add on to that, I appreciate the data as well. I guess a couple questions, may not be for you. Sampling that we have here, I'm focusing on the Clugney data. It's from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Is there a particular reason why we chose that time frame?
Yeah, we chose that time frame based on, that is currently what we've worked out with the town and where we have staffing available. So we targeted those time frames to leverage the staffing without creating additional payroll.
Okay. And as Councilwoman Bryson noted, we are limited to the data because there's some days that are missing as well. Just to add to the conversation that we're having, I'm not quite sure we're at a point where we could be making a decision yet, but as I look at some of the consistency comes to higher occupancy percentage, okay, I'm curious, and maybe I need to say this out loud for you, Mr. Gruber, along. I'm curious to know what the spillover looks like, and I'm not quite sure we can rely on PCI to help us with that. Days that we're at 100% capacity, and in this particular case on Saturday, August 12th, from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m., we have packed at the Clugney Beach Park. And I'm just curious to know what are the surrounding areas that are in question, as far as businesses are concerned, what those parking lots look like, okay? Just keeping in mind that once we start charging, we should make some assumption that people are gonna move from the paid parking to free parking.
Yes, sir. And for those that want to stay in compliance and not violate illegally parking on private property, that's where the overflow lot at USCB comes into play. And I don't believe we've ever reached capacity at that location. And so in terms of having availability, it is there. Now, to your point, what about those people that don't choose that option? That becomes very difficult to calculate. And I'm just going to use Clugney as the example, just because that's the one that comes up the most frequently in terms of these discussions. Although by no means are they the only one that's impacted. The issue becomes, how can we determine the intent of a person entering into that property? Unless you're going to follow them from their car, either into a store or from their car all the way to the beach. Because just because they're entering the lot, they could be there for proper purposes, they could be there for improper purposes. And so gathering that data becomes difficult. However, when we've talked with our service provider, there is the opportunity for that private property owner to regulate the use of that parking lot if they wanted to. And that's something that we've always kind of maintained, that if we needed to assist them with that because of this spillover effect, we could certainly look at trying to do that. But that means that they would have to establish some kind of formalized parking plan for their property as well, so that they could in fact understand the intent of the driver pulling into that property. An example of that, and it's just one example of a potential solution, is that parking at Coligny becomes paid parking, but if you go into a vendor's business, they can give you a coupon code for free parking because you visited the business. So again, not the only example, but just one example about how that could potentially be looked at. But to your point, it is something that if the vendor or if the property owner wants to work with us to try to maintain that, we can certainly look at that as well. It just becomes difficult to understand the intent of the driver when they're entering that property.
Has that proposition been raised with any of the Coligny owners?
It has.
And have you had any kind of response?
Not that I would say is actionable, but we've had certainly several conversations about various options. I think part of it is understanding what is the plan that we're ultimately going to go forward with. In their mind, if there's not paid parking, then they don't have to worry about that. But if we are going to implement paid parking, then it may lead to that additional discussion.
Before you go, Josh, I'm trying to provoke thought here. I'm not necessarily have any answers at the moment, okay? But for comparison opportunities, I'm gonna stick on the 100%. If our parking lot is at 100%, and nearby business owners' parking lots are at 100%, that's a totally different conversation as far as, are we gonna give away free passes or have you buy passes, okay? Okay. If our parking lot is at 100% and the business owners' parking lots are at 50%, and next year we look at this data and it's flipped. Okay, so I guess what I'm challenging staff here is to find out if we can bring in some data. I mean, if it's asking PCI to do a drive around whenever they reach 90% of the surrounding parking lots or what. But I just want to put us in a position where we're making solid decisions down the road versus guessing. All right?
Certainly.
That's,
We now have in place very clear ability to gather data for our properties. What we can work on is developing something where we can try to identify gathering some data for some of those surrounding properties as well, to then bring those two together.
thank you.
I'd add one more thing to that. I've always been concerned about the spillover from paid parking to businesses as well as the surrounding residential areas. Impossible to calculate, but I think we will receive feedback from those areas. Unfortunately, it may be, and I am supporting the paid parking proposal, but it may be a reaction to what happens, unfortunately. And I guess we're looking at rolling this out. If we move this to town council and town council adopts, then the effective date would be sometime during the first part of 2024. So there's some space there for gathering comments before we have actually data from the spillover. When you start something like this, you may have to go back and make some tweaks to it. I'm not sure we have enough data at this point to make a recommendation with regard to business passes.
I think the one thing that's different this time around than any previous time that the town has looked at this is we have a team and we have resources that are in place that as we understand this data, we have the capacity and flexibility to respond in a meaningful way as we move this forward. That to me is what's different now than what we've ever done before.
And if I can just jump in, with regard to those statistics, I'm in a couple of different places because the conversation was good and a few of them provoked some of my own questions and thoughts. So I'll try to make it as clean as I can. But going backwards a little bit, when you're collecting data on what's happening within the Coligny Beach Park area, do we have any sense, anecdotal or otherwise, as to what the intent of those folks are who are coming into the beach? Are they parking there to go to work? Are they parking there to cross the street and go shopping, go to Celebration Park, or down to the beach? And there's a variety of things that they too could be, their destinations might be.
Good questions. So I'm going to answer a couple of things. One, I wanted to provide a little bit more context to the spillover conversation that you about, and then also answer your question about some of the demographics. The only demographics we're really able to tell the intent is that early morning traffic, particularly at Caligny. What we're seeing are runners and bikers are the ones who are getting out in those early morning hours, and so we're able to clearly see those intent. As it gets more into the busier time of the mornings or when we start getting full, at that point, it is more about the customer service to the customers who are directly in front of us, so we lose sight about the intent of what the parker is doing. Adding more context to the spillover, what we are seeing or what we've seen throughout the summer, particularly on the weekends, is when we are at capacity, we're also seeing that the business lots over there by Caligny are at capacity as well. The thing that we saw different, at least different from what we've heard traditionally that happened this year, is we're not sure who it's tied to, but they are charging $20 in that, what we would call that strip mall where the businesses are at that by Caligny. They are charging $20 on the weekend to parkers. And they are charging this, it appears they're charging this after the fact, meaning customer pulls on, they'll park. As they're leaving out, that is when the person is now trying to collect.
Interesting.
Yeah, now and again, we don't know how this originated, how long it's been going on, but we've been able to tie it down that this is only, at least it's only going down on the weekends, and it is stopped at least as of after Labor Day. When we looked out there last Friday, we didn't see that happening. But that went on at some point, probably starting as far as back as July 4th. They were staffing in some capacity on the weekend. As we started, as you guys started requesting data, we dived into a little bit more. That's when we're seeing there's specifically doing it on the weekends, Friday through Sunday.
Was that along Pope Avenue? I just want to make sure I'm understanding the location. All of the strip malls and the shopping areas along Pope Avenue?
Well, let me say, yeah, and specifically, I guess what we're visually able to see, like I said, we've kind of started to go and inquire a little bit, whether it's from customers, but we haven't tied down like who's the originator of this. We're assuming is whoever owns that property there. But we haven't been able to tie down that portion yet. We're just kind of looking from Caligny where we staff off of Pope there and just looking across. And again, the people are wearing maybe like a safety vest or something, so it's not a company name or anything on it. We're just kind of more gathering information as we're speaking to customers or, whatever we can kind of inquire from the moment there. So we're going to look into that more, but again, as of right now, we think it is cut off for the season. So we might have to, it just might be a little bit longer path to gather the information we need there to be able to bring it back to you folks.
That'd be an interesting conversation to hear more about. Okay, thank you. In terms of, I'm going to go back to a basic question. When we say businesses, does that mean any, without thinking about restricting it just to the Caligny area or those other park areas, when we say businesses, do we refer to anyone who has a business license? And I would want to make sure that we're very careful with regard to that, because I can imagine some potential hazards down the line if it's anyone with a business license, perhaps a rental, short-term rental with a business license who are looking for places to park when they haven't accommodated their guests on their own property. So just thinking of all the issues that could become part of this issue. With regard to spillover, I imagine that those calls for services that we just heard about might go out to the sheriff's department, the folks who are parking where they shouldn't be parking, no parking streets, and all the rest. I'm just curious whether or not code enforcement has gotten any of those types of calls, and if so, how we add that. I'm not looking for an answer now, but how we add that into our thinking. And I do appreciate the statistics here from Friday, August 11th, I guess, through Labor Day that you've provided us, because if it may not be a whole picture, but it does there is a trend here. We're looking at Saturdays, the days you would expect, where there's capacity, Saturdays and some Sundays, and Labor Day. And I think that tells us a lot of information that we need to go along with when we're thinking about whether or not there's space there for businesses to have an opportunity to buy a permit to provide as a benefit to their employees. And then I just want to back up, and the fact also that, Josh, you shared with us that the overflow, intentional overflow, is USCB, and that we don't see any capacity issues there. So there is ample opportunity once this Caligny Beach Park is full for additional cars, whether they're employee cars through permit or guests who are still trying to get to the beach or out to dinner or wherever they're going. Okay, so if I got any of that wrong, clarify for me, because that's what's in my head right now is that's what I'm thinking about. The other piece that I just want to go back to is when we were talking about the penalties and fines, the $25 late fee. I didn't want to interrupt, but the question that I have is if that remains unpaid, what is the outreach and to them to get it paid, which is one piece, but in my mind, at least maybe a little bit more importantly, in terms of being able to collect and to have an impact on people doing the right thing and parking and paying properly, is if there's an unpaid ticket and they come back to the park and they're registered, the ticket's registered to their driver's license and the little mechanical thing is picking up the driver's license, will it flag that we have an unpaid ticket with violations, even as with unpaid fees attached to it, and so that there's an immediate way to address that?
Correct. So the device we use will scan the license plate, not the license, but the license plate. And that will, when we scan that license plate, it lets us know the history of that vehicle, whether it's been warnings or whether it's actually unpaid citation fines, et cetera, correct.
And so the action at that point is to have someone from your company attach the physical ticket to it, or what's the
Correct.
next?
Well, and so there's obviously escalations where if there's any type of need to do anything beyond just issuing a citation, whether that's a towing, mobilization, those things will be hammered out through the ordinance. But yes, in a traditional situation, what would happen is we would scan that vehicle. If it is a violation and deserves a citation, we would then print out that citation and leave that on the dash. Again, based on what the ordinance lays out and what the escalations would look different. If it then was the third citation and that warranted a tow, we would put that citation, we would issue that citation, put it on the vehicle, and then proceed with our towing protocol, which would be to obviously put a sticker on that vehicle at that point in time. And all those things, that total amount that customer owed would not only be a part of our system, but it would also be with the towing company, that data would be shared with them so that they would be able to collect on that if it escalated that far.
Is there a way to put into, so when somebody comes in, they park, they're putting into an app and they're paying their parking fee? Is there any way, once that payment method is put in, that any of those attached fees could be paid? I assume this would be a very rare occasion, right, that this type of scenario would happen. For me, I think one of the most important things is that people understand what our rules are, they follow our rules, and we never get down this far. But for those few, and we've seen it in the past, and it's the only reason it would say a red flag for me, they don't. And they've avoided having to be responsible to the town and to our residents and avoid paying for these types of things. So that scenario, I'm going to watch it. You don't have to explain it all to me now, but those are the types of things I am concerned about. Just make sure that our point is proven to those who need it proven.
No, and there'll be things, depending again what the violation is, there'll also be part of the protocol is, there's obviously the scanning of the license plate, but there's also going to be taking pictures, whether it's of the payment sign, if it's a payment violation, or if the person is parked in the right of way or double parked. All those things will be used with the device to collect that data so there's just not wiggle room in understanding what the violation was and why the person made the mistake.
Okay, thank you. That was a lot of great information. I'm not sure if there are any other questions on it. I do know that there is an interest in trying to stay to the timeline that Patsy mentioned earlier. So if, just a thought, last thought from everyone in terms of, and I understand the statistics, I think a survey both maybe at the parking lot to find out what those intentions are, where those folks are heading, is necessary to give you the kind of information you're looking for, Alex. But in the meantime, knowing it's a resolution and it can be changed fairly easily, what are the thoughts among the four of us with regard to setting aside a percentage of the parking spaces available within the park to provide for businesses, once we get that clearly defined, be able to purchase from the town and to add as a benefit to their employees? Any thought on that specific aspect? Because that's where we're at now to make a decision.
Yeah, two things. I'm happy to respond on that one. Then I want to ask a question about the Honors Beach data. I think at this point, we don't have enough information to be able to make a recommendation to town council on the business passes.
Yeah, I'm inclined to want to take some action at some point on sort of a mitigation strategy for the businesses, okay? I'm curious to know what the business owners in the area have to say. I mean, I don't think we've received that data in any way as a council yet, okay? I mean, they may be had some side conversations, and, now we're hearing today that maybe there's folks that are learning that paid parking is an opportunity as well. So I'd like to know a little bit more about, what the business community is thinking, as well as, gathering, a little bit more data along the way. So at this point, I'm not sure I'm ready to make a recommendation.
My apologies. I was gonna say, so because this process has been going on for a little over 2 years now, we haven't talked about it recently, but we do have some data directly from the business owners. We held a number of both public community engagement sessions and then private one-on-one sessions with them. So I can tell you, at least what we've heard previously is a concern that for particularly the Coligny area, there are a number of businesses whose employees utilize that parking lot as their parking to go to whatever businesses in that area. And their concern is that by now making it paid parking, whereas it was previously free, that will just, compound the economic impact not only on the employee, but then on the employer, and make it more difficult for them to attract and retain a workforce. And so we've heard from them kind of very clearly on that, which is why we've worked on developing a couple of different scenarios. I think staff can work towards a more defined solution when we have a little bit of guidance of, okay, we want to create some kind of exemption program, but we want to put a cap of, let's just say, I'm just picking a number out of thin air, 100 spots. We want to make sure that 100 spots are reserved for workforce. Go develop a plan that you can bring back to us that creates something like that. So if we can get a little bit of guidance in terms of what the committee and ultimately council may be looking for, I'm confident we can craft something to address it. We just got to know what the target is that we're shooting at to bring forward a recommendation about how to accomplish it. I also think one of the things that is hopefully going to come into play is the town's acquisition of the Wild Wing property. It's not closed yet, but we are under contract, and assuming that it does go through due diligence and we're able to close on it here in a couple of weeks, that could create an opportunity where we just make all or a portion of that area designated as employee parking, and then we develop a system for how we're going to have folks sign up for it. Is it on a, 2 passes per business, or is it first come, first serve? There's a number of different options that we can do. We just got to understand kind of what the thought of council is so that we can then craft something to meet that expectation.
Josh?
My reaction on an initial basis is along the lines that you're talking about, Mr. Gruber, that we should provide a method for businesses area to enable their employees to park and their customers to park without charge. That's by reimbursement or otherwise, I don't know. I think the Wild Wings appropriate to consider for off-site employee parking. My guess is that the businesses that are some distance from that will not participate so much, but I don't know offhand whether there needs cap or not. Initially, I don't see the reason. Maybe. Those are my preliminary reactions.
Anything else before I jump in? Go ahead, Pat.
Yeah, I like that approach. Just thinking about the timing, I'd like to, assuming the rest of the committee would agree to move forward with the ordinance language to go ahead and get that before town council sometime in the fall schedule. And that the resolution establishing parking rates could include some approach on businesses and have that follow after the adoption of the ordinance. That's what I'm thinking timing wise, so be ready for next year. And I'll wait till they finish. So adopting the ordinance and then later doing the resolution, which could have some sort of approach on business parking. And that would be accomplished maybe towards the end of the year, first of next year, so we can begin it before the spring season next year. And so I like that approach. The other thing I would say is, in addition to the businesses, in Scaligny Plaza, and then, forgive me if I don't have the right name, the Circle Center. We always call it the Bilo Shopping Center, but since Bilo's not there anymore, I don't know what to call it. Circle Center, thank you. So there are other businesses in the area as well, smaller businesses. But the other concern that I have is paid parking and its impact on the residential areas. So I would hope that we would circle back to doing some sort of outreach to the community and to assuring the residents in that area that there will be enforcement once we go into paid parking there. Both those approaches.
So I'm very interested. Yes, we've had conversations. This is an ongoing conversation that we've had. And there have been sidebar conversations, as you mentioned, Alex, but I believe the town has had significant conversation with the businesses and the owners down in the Coligny area. I am very hesitant to designate any particular parking lot to employee parking only. We have parking concerns, and I believe Mr. Babel will point out what he mentioned to me over the weekend, that we have folks who intend to visit Hilton Head from off island, and who will not be able to find a parking spot if we take that new purchase and designate it to parking only for the businesses in the area who themselves had an opportunity to buy the land and use for parking. So that's a double burden on the community that I'm unwilling to accept. There are other uses. USCD is still open and has capacity. There are shuttles that are run. There's opportunity there. And if it's true, and it'll be interesting to hear more about this, that some entity thinks that $20 a parking experience in the Coligny shopping area is smart, then they have to appreciate that we too, as a community looking out for the best interest of our residents and our visitors and our businesses, all, it's time for paid parking to happen. So, and I hear what you put forth, Patsy, with regard to how, in your mind, early fall, it would be moving on to town council. We're mid-September. This is fall. And we need to, if not today, at our next meeting, we do need to have some idea of what it is that we want to move forward. Town council needs to have this in front of them so that staff can do the necessary work that they need to do, so that we can implement something, so that when the next season is here upon us, we're up and running, and as many as the kinks can be washed out. So is there something that some direction that we can agree to give staff to be prepared for town council to consider with regard to business. And we move that forward today.
And Councilwoman Bryson, I think this is what you may have been getting at with regard to the business permits. But we could also consider including language in the ordinance that authorizes business permits to be established via resolution, which would allow the ordinance to go forward if that's the intent, while also leaving open that avenue for business permits to be established, even if it's not right at the start of the enactment of the ordinance, but via the resolution process.
Yeah, I think that'd be fine as long as the language is may establish as opposed to shall establish.
Right.
I could live with that, too, so.
Chair, can I just ask a quick question about
absolutely
the
may.
date on Islanders Beach? Which, I thank you for that data as well. I think it's very helpful. I know we gave you a short time to look at it, but it's very interesting to me to see, weekend use. It looks like it's higher. And then also the metered spaces. I was wondering how many times it was 100%. So there were some. That's not highlighted in particular color. I think the next slide, I'm not sure who's driving, driving the boat there, or driving the slide tray. I think the next one, yeah, there we go. So there's the yellow showing up. I think that's 100% of the metered parking, but I think there were some other metered parkings, and maybe that's 100% of all of the parking spaces. Although it looks like Labor Day, it wasn't as full for the resident spaces, but because this is a more controlled, if you will, spot, I think it helps us analyze data. We don't have the same business conflict. We do have residential areas that it conflicts with. But I think this is helpful to look at. And I wondered what the numbers would look like for the resident spaces versus the metered spaces. So I just wanted to point it out and say thank you, because this is an area that's very important to our residents as far as parking goes.
Absolutely, and just to add a little bit more context there, in line with the question you asked earlier, some of the intents we see out at that Islanders lot, or we see early on a lot of dog walkers and people just exercising, obviously. One of the interesting things we noticed from this data that we collected here was Islanders, prior to, I guess, that July 4th weekend, it was full every weekend, every day, every weekend, all the way through the 4th. After the 4th, we noticed, and obviously it's reflected in this data here, we didn't have the resident spaces go full, with the exception of, I believe, September 2nd and September 3rd, which, again, that was pretty shocking, not only to the staff that we had out there, but ultimately to the residents who came out there as well, because I think traditionally we had heard the chatter that it typically been full. The other thing we noticed is, again, you saw some of the meter spaces, we didn't go full there as well into that Labor Day weekend. And again, going back as far as July 4th and that time period before that, those things were full as well every day on the weekend as well. So that was interesting data to us, that we didn't go full until Labor Day at the respective lot. But again, it was good that, again, to the point of you folks requesting the data, it allows us to see that transparent.
And I just wonder, remind me when your system went into full effect. Was that before July 4th?
So the system is not in full effect at this point. I think what we did, even in response to some of the requests that you made at the last meeting, was we used our resources to be able to get onto these lots and start doing manual counts. That way we would be able to provide information so that you can drive it. We actually have information with the town right now to make a decision on some tree trimming or hardwiring some equipment. And then we will see a heavy inflow of data that will be readily available. So we'll get that going when those decisions are made, but we were trying to drive the conversation. And to the point of what you pointed out, we feel like this Islanders lot is a great opportunity to make some decisions, not only based on some of the data collected, but to your point, there's not a business component being impacted there. I think we would look out for the resident more primarily at this location.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, all right.
This is a question for you, Mr. Gruber. Are we still looking to roll out all of the paid parking with the listed sites at once? Is that the intent?
Certainly could be. And I don't want to not directly answer your question. The program's flexible. So we've heard from members of council that they would like to see the program implemented before the start of our next, heavy tourist season next year. Now, whether we phase that in or whether we just try to accomplish all at once, it's a policy direction that certainly, if council feels comfortable one way or the other. I think at this point, given the information that we have and how things have been structured, if the committee and council are comfortable going ahead and implementing it for all of the spaces, we could certainly do that. But if there are concerns and you want to do trial runs or kind of phase it in, we can certainly do that as well.
I'm just responding to the conversation we're having around Islanders right now, because I'm understanding that during the summer months, when you were able to gather some data, we were full for the residents and full at the meters. Is that correct?
Correct, but also with that being said, there were violators mixed into that. We have some of that citation warning data that we provide as well. But yeah, we had some of that going on as well. But to your point, yes, spaces were full, but not always necessarily with the right demographic of parkers.
So I guess where I'm going is, if we do decide to phase, I think we need to put resources on the ground so we understand what the numbers look like at these other places that we're not rolling out, if that's through manual counting or whatever, okay? I think that helps us see the big picture as we move along. Because I'm making an assumption here, and it's just an assumption, that we've seen the numbers sort of decline at Islanders Beach, particularly on the residential side. Or is that because there's more opportunity to go somewhere else as we get into the shoulder seasons versus Islanders Beach? I don't know the answer to that, but that's just an assumption that one could make. So I guess my head is wrapped around this holistically as we move forward, particularly as we start to talk about rates and times, okay? But for today, Madam Chair, I'm okay with the suggestion that Mr. DeFord has mentioned as far as putting language in the ordinance that gives us the opportunity down the road to resolve the business parking.
If you're looking for a motion,
No, I wanted to make a comment, but then you're welcome to make them, but if Mac is finished. I wanted to also point out with regard to Islanders, unless y'all are collecting the information, it's anyone with the appropriate pass, and then maybe up to 25 more, who is able to use any space. So we can't necessarily classify that those 25 spaces have been used by non-permitted cars. It could be that resident permitted cars are parking in those parking spaces as well. So there's not a lot of clarity necessarily there. And that would also make a difference with regard to these numbers. So numbers are a funny thing. We need more of them. We always do. A resolution allows us flexibility for the future, correct? And it's something that we want to make sure that staff has plenty of time to work through. So if we can, are you finished with your presentation, or do we have another piece to talk about?
No, I'm all finished with my presentation.
Okay, so for today, so we're not going to talk about charge costs per.
The rates.
The rates, that's the word.
Well, so if currently as contemplated, the ordinance provides that the parking rates are set via resolution. So we could send with this ordinance to town council a proposal for what those parking rates will look like, or send this ordinance to town council with the understanding that those rates will be set by resolution of town council at a later time. That could come from the committee as a recommendation.
Right, and my hesitation is a lot of work has to happen in committee. This is where we should be able to come to an agreement and move it to town council so they can be fully briefed and understand what it is that we've been working hard on, what staff's helped us with achieving, so that that work is moves more quickly, and that we're not doing what we should have done here, there. So do we have I assume everyone read the packet, they see the statistics from other neighborhoods. I would prefer to send something at least that has been worked through, talked about, and understood to town council in that motion, Patsy, that I'm hoping you're constructing in your head. Any thoughts with regard to hourly
The rate schedule.
or daily? Because it does not necessarily need to be hourly. It can be daily. We are not bound by what other communities have been doing. Our purpose intent, I think, should push this forward. And one other caveat that I want to make sure that I present, before we begin this discussion is, it's my full intention that this be revenue neutral. Worst case scenario and best case scenario, if there were any generation of extra revenue, that it be used to offset residents' $15 a year permit fee for parking, and then whatever else might be able to come from that afterwards. But I want to make sure that we have funds available to pay for all of these expenses that we are incurring to push through a parking program.
Make sure I'm clear on what we're trying to accomplish, Madam Chair. So are we suggesting that we change the proposed ordinance, that we do not set the rates through ordinance, through resolution?
No, I think
Or
we
you
should
saying
set
that-
through resolution so that we have more flexibility in terms of once all of the data comes through, right? Because we don't have a crystal ball to be able to be fluid over time. Does that answer your
You're asking the
question?
committee to make a recommendation of what the pay rate resolution should be.
So that we have something that we can move forward, that we've discussed and come to an agreement. So that we're not just throwing it on colleagues in town councils.
Just not quite sure if that takes two different actions, because the ordinance is in front of us, correct?
So it's two different, did you intend for us to get through that today, or do you want to revisit that at
The-
another,
The resolution?
the parking
Well,
fees, rates?
that could be considered. I mean, that would be a separate, I think, motion to send forward a corresponding resolution for the payment rates. So I think that would be an appropriate way to sort of splice this out.
And I don't see a resolution before, I see the ordinance before us. I don't see a resolution before us. So I guess the question is, if we wanted to recommend a resolution, can we do that because it has not been noticed?
So at this point, the committee is making a recommendation up to town council. And if the committee wanted to condition its recommendation of the ordinance upon a corresponding resolution following with it, I think the committee is free to do that as part of its recommendation.
Making a recommendation to town council.
And the only other question I have is what Mr. Brown mentioned about phasing, because I think we could adopt the ordinance recommendation that the committee establish a resolution on the parking rates, including consideration of a maximum daily rate, and then including a recommendation on phasing in. As we can do that.
Absolutely. And so then what we would do, if that is the motion that comes out of this body, is we would send the ordinance up to council, but then staff would also draft a resolution to go on the agenda with it. And so they would be taken kind of in tandem on that agenda.
And I think the question the chair is asking is that send the ordinance on to town council with a recommendation for adoption of the ordinance, then and then we have a recommendation that there be a resolution establishing rates without this committee discussing the specific rates and acting on those, then the resolution would need to come back before the committee before the resolution goes to town council.
There's a couple of different ways that we can take that up. You can either have it go forward to council with a request that it come back for more discussion, or you can hold off on sending it forward until you've seen the rates. Part of what staff is trying to feel out is what do you feel comfortable with? And so if it's a request of the committee that you'd prefer to see a resolution identifying the rates first, then what I would say is not vote on recommending that this move forward. But if you feel comfortable in saying we feel the ordinance should go forward and we'd like to see what it looks like at council in terms of a resolution, and then maybe request that it come back for additional discussion. Again, there's a couple different ways we can take it up. It's what you feel comfortable doing in terms of your legislative action.
Would this committee feel most comfortable spending one more meeting on this, having the opportunity to set those rates in, as a recommendation to town council when we move it forward. I'm okay with another meeting.
Yeah, I'm
I
okay
just
with
don't
the-
want it to labor.
Question as to whether the rates that are appearing before us are those recommended by staff.
So at this point, the data that you have before you is based upon a market analysis. This was originally a recommendation from the consultant that the town hired in developing the beach parking master plan. The element that I think is not included, but based upon the feedback from members of this committee, is that in addition to the hourly rates that are based upon a market analysis, we should also look at establishing a maximum daily rate to also go along with the hourly rates. And so if we can do that, then I think what we would bring back would be the staff's recommendation for setting the rates.
Thank you.
Within the document, there's a parking rate discussion page, and it gives some of the other communities similar to ours and what they've done, just for reference, yes.
I'm going to talk out loud before I would try to put together a motion. What if the motion were to say, recommend adoption of the draft ordinance as proposed, with the language adding that, with language being added that by resolution, we may establish a,
Business permits.
yeah, the ordinance would include some language that, business parking program may be included. That's what I'm trying to say. And then the second part of the motion would be, and that, the committee consider, acting on a resolution on the rate schedule, at our next committee meeting. That once that's done, then they would both move in tandem to the town council.
Does that help with staff's ability to know where we're
Yeah.
heading and be able to get y'all started with what you need to do?
Correct. And actually, now that I'm processing it, as I'm talking out loud at the same time, because the first one's coming forward as an ordinance, it's going to take 2 readings. And so what we could do is read this out at the town council meeting tomorrow in terms of action for the committee, which means first reading would be on the council agenda for October 3rd. We would then have the committee meeting prior to the next town council meeting in October, where we could bring forward a resolution, talk about it, you could forward it, and then we'd have to talk with the mayor about adding it to the agenda. But from a timing standpoint, we could then have both of those teed up at the same meeting when you're doing second reading of the ordinance and consideration of the resolution, or we can hold off on the ordinance and wait till the two come forward together. But there's options there. But I think from a timing standpoint, we could move this forward. We could have it go before council and then bring forward the resolution prior to final adoption of the ordinance.
I got it.
My goal is to make sure that we don't labor over this for another 2 years, but that we act in a way that provides direction to staff and puts things in motion to be able to accomplish the time frame that we've notified people that we are thinking of. And for anyone who's listening who may not be familiar with what we've done, I recommend in going back through our minutes, but also the agenda packet for today has a lot of the history in there that you might find useful. And with any questions to that, please feel free to reach out to myself, any one of our committee members, or town staff for clarification. Just for anyone who may be a little bit unaware of what we've been doing for the last while now. So we have 2 options. Patsy, what's your motion going to say?
Yeah, I was just going to ask Madam Chair, I'm happy to make it now unless you want to ask if there's any public comment.
Do we need order? Do we need to have a motion before we ask for public comment, or prior to?
At least what we've done at the town council is to entertain a motion in a second and then open it up for discussion prior to a vote.
Correct. So,
Right. I move that we recommend adoption of the draft ordinance before us. I don't think it has, does it have a number? 2023-17, I think it's the right number, with the inclusion of language that allows for business parking passes to be considered. And that the committee consider adopting a resolution establishing the rates, including a consideration of a maximum daily rate at our next committee meeting, and that the two actions be adopted on final reading at the same time.
Okay? All right.
I'll second the motion. Before you open the public
Yes,
comment,
sir.
just discussion,
Yeah.
just, 'cause I don't want to get stuck, when we get to the point of talking rates, I need to say this out loud. I think there's a discussion around, revenue neutral or not, okay? And now that we have some data, I would just hope that staff is making a recommendation to us with those parameters in mind, okay? As far as a rate is concerned, not just a market study. Okay. Yep.
Sorry. So if I hear what you're saying, Mr. Brown, you're talking about, now we see the numbers of people and the numbers of parkers at spaces, and we can multiply that times the rate, and come up with some number of how much revenue might be expected compared to the cost.
I think that's a real, very important conversation, and one that I guess we'll pick up at our next meeting, and why we need this time for us to discuss that, so we're clear when we're representing it to the full town council. Okay, thank you for that. And if I may ask, if there's anyone who has been with us this morning who has an interest in speaking on this topic, to please raise their hand and come forward. Frank, Mr. David. Okay, Melinda.
Right. My name is Melinda Tunner. I live at 20 Lenox Lane in Palmetto Hall, and I have a couple of suggested revisions for you to consider to the language of the beach parking ordinance. And I'm assuming we're talking about this document here that was in the pre-read. Under purpose and intent, it says establish regulations for the management of paid parking areas for public beach access. Now, most of the parks have a beach-only purpose, but Coligny, Chaplin, and I saw on the fine list, Parker Field and Low Country Celebration may have parking beyond just the beach, like going to work, attending an event, or playing tennis. So I suggest that you could use the word near instead of far. So instead of paid parking for public beach access, it's paid parking near public beach access. And that verbiage is also in the first line of the definitions section as well. There should also be consistency of language for who is eligible for resident beach parking. In section 12.5.516, it simply states the town shall issue resident beach passes for individuals who can prove primary residency. But in section 12.5.512, there's that lengthy description, which he already went through. So they're not aligned. So there needs to be consistency there. I would remove the word special for 4% special assessment ratio. The state does not refer to it as a special assessment, although we may feel special when we get it.
You put, Melinda, one second. Kim, when you get a chance, can you pull this up? Or Mac, whoever? Okay. Thank you, just so we see it as we're moving through.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Okay. There's also the opportunity to get consistent with the eligibility of living on the island. You have jurisdiction of the town of Hilton Head Island and purpose and intent, municipal limits of the town with the definition of the resident, and within the town of Hilton Head Island, resident beach pass area. So the different areas just have different descriptions of what it means to live in the town. So being consistent. And lastly, the names of the designated parking areas are not consistent within the ordinance or how they are referenced in your town website. So example is Castnet Drive Beach Park. It's referenced in the town website as Burke's Beach Access. Chaplin Park Beach is Chaplin Community Park. Droysen, Follyfield Islanders, and Caligny Beach are missing the word park, and Adler Beach is Adler Beach Access as listed on your website. So, and then on the fine list, there were more areas listed than what's listed on this section. So just looking for consistency in those areas, and I thank you for the opportunity to provide feedback.
Thank you. Thank you for those details.
All right, can I ask her a quick question? The fine list, FINE, what subsection is that in? At 12-5-520?
Oh, well, the fine list that you were just reviewing with the.
Are you talking about the parking
presentation.
rates?
Oh, I'm sorry, did I say fine?
Yeah,
I meant
that's okay.
the parking rates.
Gotcha, thank you.
I was obsessed about the fine for some reason.
Gotcha.
Frank, would you like to join us?
Thank you, and Frank Babel for the record. When I used to work, I always remembered the adage that Ross Perot said, always understand what problem you're working on. And you folks are dealing with a very, very complicated problem here. Very complicated, but that's the problem. What is the problem? The problem is we have too many cars coming into a small place trying to find a place to park so they can go to the beach. Well, about 10 years ago, Sea Pines had a problem like that. They had about 95 parking spots at the beach club and a few in another place. And they said, you know, we need to change. I don't think they really had a Department of Transportation or alternative transportation. They said, we have to change. So at that time, there were probably, I don't know, maybe 50 bikes that used to park there. It wasn't really a trolley system. And if you fast forward 10 years, and it took 10 years incrementally, but every Sunday, there's 600, 700, 800 bikes parked there. The trolley system is moving. A lot of people are going there, and the place is crowded. So we have a transportation department now, and so I would suggest that the problem is that you have too many cars competing for a limited space. And so that's the problem that you have to solve. And you have a transportation department now that we have in the town that I would suggest people start saying, let's start incrementally start getting some more solutions, because it isn't going to get any better. There are 15,000 permits pending in the Argent property. They all think that they're moving to Hilton Head. And where is their beach? It's going to be in Pope Ave. How are we going to fit them into that place? We've only begun to see the beginning of the problem. We really need an alternative site to Pope in that Caligny Beach area. We need to start thinking that way, and it's going to take us a long time to get there, but we need to start thinking of it. And so I'd encourage this committee to, looking at public policy, to charge the town staff, and that's what they're there for, to start thinking about alternatives and start getting more people to go someplace else to get to the beach by bike, by trolley, or something else, so they're not all getting so angry when they come here and you see those people just trying to find a place to park. That's not the experience we want. That's not Hilton Head. It's a big problem, but it's going to take a while to solve. And we now have a department that's in place to deal with that supposedly. So I'd encourage you to use them. Thank you very much.
I want to follow up on one of the things that, that Frank always makes some observations, and they're important for us to hear, as well as the observations that Melinda made. Folks who live off the island, who think they live on Hilton Head, is problematic when they look at us as their beach. And we have to consider the quality of life for our residents first and foremost, period. And while we'd love to be all things to all people and have endless resources to do that with, we don't. And so we have to be careful that we never forget our priority while we remain welcoming to others. And that's a task that makes it hard for all of us, because we're good people and we want that to do that. when I think about how we might be able to accomplish that welcome door, lights and speeding to get to a destination, all of those negative things that we've spoken about can be, in my mind, relatively well solved by creating these park and ride situations. Employees coming onto the island can live wherever they want to live, have the lifestyle and home that they choose without being forced to be crammed into an artificial housing situation here on the island that does not develop into the community that they want to be part of. And so when we talk about the amount of revenue coming out of this and whether we remain revenue neutral or we look for any additional revenue created, what we could do with those dollars, my mind, and I'll continue to promote and talk about and hopefully influence, that's the solution we need. We need a place where folks can put their cars, even if they have their bikes on the back and they toot along and they come down and they go to where they want to go on their bikes, as I'm sure Mr. Fable would prefer everyone to do, or they hop on a trolley type system that we have here on the island to accommodate. That should be a priority to solve many of these problems and to be good neighbors and to be first quality of life for our residents. So having said all of that, I do have a concern. Melinda, your comments and observations are well taken. I hope someone made note of them. I know I just sent you a text and asked you to send them to me. But I wonder if those ought to be looked at closely prior to us creating an ordinance.
I made a list of them as she went along. I consider them to be technical and not substantive amendments. So the maker of the motion would agree to amend the motion to include those technical amendments listed by Ms. Tunner today. If the second will agree with that. And I think we can take care of it that way without bringing it back.
You okay with that, Josh?
And thank you, Ms. Tunner, for helping us out with editing.
Okay. Well, then we have a motion and a second on the table. And do we need a roll call, Kim?
Sorry.
We have a motion and a second on the table. Do we need a roll call for the vote? Okay. All in favor, raise your right hand. Right, 4-0. And we'll revisit this again at our next meeting to help to resolve the issues that'll go into the resolutions. Thank you. And thank you for everyone's patience today. I'm going to make a personal observation in terms of my committee agenda structure in the future. When we have guests in the House who have come to make a presentation, I'd like for them to be first because they have good work and we appreciate their patience today. But we won't set it up this way again. And so I'd like to welcome Chief Blankenship to the podium to give his mid-year report and to say thank you to all of the other fire and rescue in the room for hanging in with us.
All right, thank you. Chris Blankenship, Fire Chief for the record. So I'm going to start off. So this report will be our January 1st through June 30th report. It's our mid-year. But I just want to start off just kind of giving you guys an update on what's transpired the last week here on the island. As all of you know, we've had 3 structure fires displacing families across the island over the last 7 days. So with, unfortunately, last night being a fatality fire here on the island in Sea Pines. So our investigators, along with Beaufort County Sheriff's Office, South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, and State Fire were on scene until 5:30 this morning, investigating, getting their initial on-scene investigation done. So that's an ongoing investigation. I can't really comment on it, but we did have a fatality fire on Hilton Head last night. So
And our hearts and prayers are
very
with
sad
the
night. So
family members.
with that, I'll get into our report. Did you all receive a copy of our mid-year data report sent with the thing? So I'm not going to go through the data. If you have any questions on that, we'll be happy to answer that. So we'll start off with the operations. We averaged 26 average incidents per day in this time frame, which is pretty consistent with 2022. As you can see, we're down 15 calls from 2022 to 2023, so staying pretty consistent. Our busiest stations, so Station 1 for fire, which is the shipyard station, Station 7, which is, we used to call it the Cross Island Station. I don't know what we're going to call it anymore. Now the Cross Island, or the toll booth station's gone. For EMS, it was Station 5, that's the front gate of Hilton Head Plantation, followed by Station 1, again in Shipyard. Consistently over my 22 years here, those have been our busiest stations. Top 4 incident types, fire alarm activations, unintentional, authorized controlled burning. That is our registered burn checks that we conduct on Saturdays at burn days. So 178, we do about 400 a year, so that's pretty consistent. Smoke detector activation with no fire and alarm system sounding to due to malfunction, which I will say, I think over the last few years, especially those, the malfunctioning alarm system numbers are going down. Top 3 medical incidents is a very generic EMS call excluding vehicle accident with injury is our top. Our motor vehicle accidents with injuries, 117, and dispatch and canceling route 61. So I will say the motor vehicle accidents, we do not go to, I would say, a fraction of what the sheriff's office goes to every year because there's no injuries or hazards with that. But I would say those are taking up. We do see more accidents, in my opinion, in the last couple of years, really since COVID, with more people on the island than we have in the past. So top 3 medical impressions, that's what what our people visualize when they get there is generalized weakness, syncope, and injury of the head. That's usually due to falls, and that is very typical with our elderly population here on the island. With that, I'm going to invite Chief Pfister up here to give you guys a little brief on our community risk reduction division.
So good morning, Joe Pfister, Deputy Chief. We just wanted to give you a little update. Our Bureau of Fire Prevention, we do so much more than fire prevention as part of that. So starting in July, we're starting to rebrand what we call that is going to change to community risk reduction. We're working right now on updating the website and transitioning to that. But really, as part of our accreditation, as part of the ISO, as part of a nationwide Vision 2020 for the fire service is to move to community risk reduction. And what does that really mean? It means that those 5 things up there are really what we focus on. Educating, which is educating on all things that are risk on the island. So we're looking at expanding our fall prevention because that is a very large part of what we go to on medical calls. We are going to start observing fire drills with our assisted livings because that is what we find in addition to their medical calls, fire alarms are what we're going to the most there. And so then also doing some things enforcement wise as well. We're looking at a program to help us better check our sprinkler systems and our alarm systems. Those are done by a third party, but our fire inspectors follow up on any kind of things that are done with those systems. So we're looking at a third party vendor to help us to organize and know what is going on with all of those systems so that we can bring them into compliance better. And then just the other part of it is that this is just to show you all of the things that what is termed our Bureau of Fire Prevention right now does. We do the inspections and permitting. They are part of the fire investigations on any fire. We do the smoke alarm installs. Anybody on the island that needs them, we go do them. But then outside of the fire side, we also have a very large community education program, and we talk about all of the different risks. And it's something that when we get done with our data every year, we look at what things are we at risk in our community for, and how can we better prepare our community to deal with those things. And CPR and AED education is one of those things, and that goes into we recently had a cardiac save at Sea Pines Country Club, and it is really a testament to our program over the last 20 years of encouraging our community to place AEDs in their businesses, the churches, our golf clubs, and Sea Pines Country Club has been in our program almost since the inception, and they started with one AED, they're now up to 6. And as a part of that, they train their employees and they know what to do. And so we got to go meet the person that they saved because they got their AED, they put it on him, they did CPR, and then we got there and took over care and got him to the hospital. So it really is a testament to our community risk reduction program and all of the things we put into place. The dispatcher that is on, shown up there, she basically said when she answered the phone, she didn't have to say a whole lot to them because she could hear them in the background doing all of the things that she would tell them to do. So it was a great day to see a good outcome to what we do out in the community. That is all.
All right, so we can do emergency management. Oh, I'm sorry.
If you guys are okay if we interrupt you a little bit and ask questions and make comments?
Oh,
on your
absolutely.
presentation, okay. Yes, Alex.
I didn't memorize the rebranding, but I know it has something to do with risk prevention.
Community risk reduction.
Okay. And there was one bullet there that talked about incentives. Go back a couple slides. Yes. Do you have any examples of what that looks like? Just
So typically that is, like a lot of the things we do, there are economic incentives for having alarms, for having sprinkler systems. One of the things that is been discussed many a times in the state is having some incentives for getting people to install sprinkler systems. We have talked about it at different times over the years, and we haven't gotten to a consensus on that, but it brings their insurance rates down because they are sprinklered. So, you know, we've talked about over the years, is there something that the town could do to give some sort of incentive to when people aren't necessarily required to have a sprinkler system, because there certainly are occupancies that have to, but is there something we could do as a town to encourage people to put in systems when they're not required to? Because we know that if a building has a sprinkler system and it activates, the damage that's caused and the life loss is a lot less. So it's certainly something that we are going to continue to explore and see if there's some other things we can put into place.
thank you.
And I just want to jump in real fast. And for those folks who are building homes and working for remodeling, I think a quick investigation as to whether or not it makes sense for them to install a sprinkler system should be some time that they spend to see if they can fit that into the budget. Because you're right. The other thing that I wanted to say is y'all have a community program to go out into the, and I'm not speaking to you as much as maybe those who are listening, to go out and to help with fire detector installations. And I think that's an incredibly good program, and every member of the community who needs that help should give you guys a call to take advantage of that, because fire alarms save lives as well.
And we're actually starting to see some of the outcomes from alarms that we have installed over, you know, the last 5 years or so since we started Fire in the Streets. We are having fires that those alarms are giving that early notification. So it is very satisfying to see that come to fruition.
And I'm just going to throw out my appreciation to Fire and Rescue on a personal note, but also to add for, I saw one of the incidents that y'all had to respond to recently was a second floor where folks had to move themselves out of harm's way and jumped. There are ladder kits that, and I meant to bring mine today, that are literally this big. And for anyone my recommendation as someone who cares, is to buy them. They're not expensive. Put them in every second floor, third floor, fourth floor bedrooms, so that you know you have an access out regardless. Simple and easy to do. I made them Christmas gifts a couple of years ago to everybody in the family, so that they have them in their homes as well. Thank you for everything that you do. We recently were able to attend the CPR, AED training at Fire and Rescue. I hope everyone took advantage of it, and I know it's open to the public. It doesn't cost anything, and it's an easy process. It's not like it used to be where it was hours of training. It was a quick and easy tutorial, and there is a whole set of confidence that gets built into someone who's completed that training, so that they too would be able to help in an emergency like what you demonstrated or showed. So everyone should take advantage of that and help out with saving lives.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry to pick on the deputy chief. You talked about fire in the streets, and I know you responded to Mr. Brown about economic incentives, about sprinklers. So can you help me? I'm a newbie on what do we have for smoke detector assistance to those who might either not be able to afford it or not be encouraged to use them?
So we provide smoke alarms. We purchase some, and then we get some grants, and we work with the state to get alarms to be able to install. So anybody who needs one can call, and then we go out and install them. And then we also have we have two programs that we do, Fire in the Streets, which we, based on data in areas that we know we are more likely to have fires in, we go out and we canvass the neighborhood, we talk about fire safety, and we install smoke alarms for them. And we also have incorporated putting up their addresses as well so that we can better find them. And then we also have after the fire, which once we do have a fire, we go back into that neighborhood and we check them again. And we offer to talk about what the fire was and if it was preventable, how they cannot have that same thing happen in their home. So they are available. They can contact our office. That's part of what we're working on as part of the rebrand and the website, is that they can also, will be able to go online and just request for somebody to come out and do smoke alarms there as well.
And I'm sure you do some sort of community outreach. I'm thinking of, through Deep Well, a good organization to be able to reach out to folks in the community, and Boys and Girls Club, and certainly a lot of community churches.
Yes. We also, another thing that we did is part of the town's program where they could apply for things to be fixed in their homes. As part of that, they also were looked at, do they have smoke alarms? And we were notified if they did not, so that we could go out and put them in there. But there's a couple of the churches we've worked with. I know First Pres, they have a program, and we have asked for them, if they go out to do work on someone's home, to look to be our eyes, because we can't be everywhere. So we do have some partnerships in place as well.
Great, thank you for helping me with some education.
To your point with regard to not being able to be everywhere, I know that this slide, a couple of slides prior, it is with regard to business licenses. Now everyone who rents a home needs a business license. And so I know that we don't necessarily inspect those. I worry about them. I've made this comment before. I worry about those rentals that are businesses and don't necessarily have, I realize on our application, they check it off. It's way too important. So I would, again, encourage all of us to think about whether or not there's a better way to ensure those rentals units, which are businesses, are inspected for proper fire prevention equipment.
I would give you some feedback. We did, during that whole process, we did speak a lot to the rental companies as to, where they needed to place them, how many they needed to have. So I think that even though we weren't in every single home, it is being recognized and they are doing it. Because we took a lot of calls during that time. And if they did not have something marked with the smoke alarms and the fire part, then our deputy fire marshal followed up with them to make sure that they were in compliance. So we do play a part in it. And I would,
Yeah, I think the compliance is high with the.
You have more
the
confidence than
known
I.
Companies on
The
the
com-
island,
yes.
property management companies, not the Verbos and stuff like that. I can't speak about, but I will say with the known companies, on the island that have been doing this a long time.
Thank you for that
And we
outreach. I wasn't
did-
unaware of that, and I'm thrilled to hear that that's.
a couple things that also came out of that, because we have the carbon monoxide alarms in there as well. We had a couple calls that were generated because the carbon monoxide alarms were going into alarm from their pool heaters. And so, we've had some good outcomes as well. So we know that people are putting the alarms in where they weren't before, and there are things that are being caught because of the ordinance, so.
Well, that's great information. I'm glad I brought up the question. Thank you. And it's so incredibly important to save lives.
Madam Chair, thank you for asking that, because I've been concerned about that with regard to our SCRs, and I appreciate that y'all were active in that. But I guess my question is there more that we should consider in our permitting program with short-term rentals to make sure there is compliance? And I wrote a note down that you have a third-party vendor who does enforcement.
So there's third-party vendors that with commercial buildings, they do the alarm inspections and the sprinkler inspections, and we get their reports in, and then we process the reports. And if there are deficiencies, we follow up to make sure that the business owner gets those deficiencies fixed so that their systems are in compliance. So that's, like, we don't go look at their sprinkler systems. They have to pay somebody to do that. And then we follow up if there's something wrong with them.
So it's the applicant who has to use a third-party vendor to do the inspection, and then you go and check, you look at their data. Okay, all right. Sorry, while we're talking about this, it'll come back to me. It has to do with fire protection, so it's not like, what are we having for lunch?
Well, while you're thinking about that.
Thank you, sorry.
You guys are great, and thank you for answering all of our questions.
Yeah, no
It's so
problem.
critically important for us.
Emergency management, community presentations, they did 13 presentations with 430 attendees and distributed 1,150 preparedness guides, both in English and Spanish. So had a busy first half of the year. Our 911 communications center, it's just a little breakdown of their call intake, which all three categories: 911 calls, non-911 calls, and their total calls, which is their for the year, have all gone up since 2022. Our staffing update. So we promoted a battalion chief of strategic planning, which is Christopher Osterman back there. He is really, him and Chief Pfister put this whole thing together. He does our data, he does our accreditation. He's like the brainchild behind everything we do. So I'm a very data-driven guy. I like numbers, I like data. I like to show the need through data. So he's done a fantastic job. He put together our strategic plan, which we'll be bringing to you next month for adoption. The strategic reassignment of 2 captains in the newly formed Community Outreach and Recruitment Division. So this report, since this is January to July, you will not see that, but I will imagine in our annual report, it will be very heavily on Captain Ferguson and Jenkins and what they've already done in their very short time in those positions out in our community. We hired a 4th fire inspector, hired a digital marketing communication specialist, and we promoted 12 personnel within the organization. We onboarded 22 new employees, 12 firefighters, 9 telecommunicators, and 1 fire inspector. And we kind of like to give the breakdown of where they come from. So 5 locally living here on Hilton Head, 2 in our Skill Bridge program, which is a military program that last 6 months of their military enlistment, they're supposed to be reacclimated to civilian life. So the town of Hilton Head has partnered with the military to provide opportunities for them to come here. We're required to train them in the field that they have chosen, and we don't pay them because they still work for the military and everything. So that has been very successful for us. We have two people out of that program, 8 within the state, and then 7 outside of South Carolina. So our staffing, we're looking pretty good right now on the operations side. On the line firefighters, Chief Cunningham has the next hires lined up through the end of the year. Really, we're just waiting on fire academy spots, or they would be here now. So we're looking pretty good there. Oh, here you go. We're filling 4 vacancies in operations, 1 anticipated retirement, 1 promotional vacancy, and 2 open firefighter positions. We just today, our new mechanic started. In October, we'll have our emergency management coordinator. It'll be a part-time position to help Tom Dunn with his emergency management duties. And in January, we'll be promoting an EMS lieutenant for the EMS division. And the only reason we're waiting till January is because that'll allow us to get some more guys through class, through paramedic school, and onboarded and recepted. So some accomplishments for the first half of the year: we implemented our fire rescue chaplain program through a community partnership with 4 local clergy members. So June Wilkins from Christ Lutheran Church, she's kind of heading it up for us. Pastor Louis Johnson from Central Oak Grove Missionary Baptist Church, Rabbi Bloom from the Congressional Beth Yam, and Bill McCutcheon from Hilton Head Presbyterian. So we've brought them on. We've onboarded them. They've come to some trainings. They will do our ceremonies, and they'll really just be our outreach for any of our members that need to talk to someone that don't otherwise have anyone. So it's been a very good program. And we look forward to that, the continuation of that. So we did complete our strategic planning workshop and draft the new strategic plan.
Can I ask a question on
Absolutely.
that? So just taking into consideration, over the last couple of weeks, we've had some incidents that have not only loss of life, but loss of quality of life because of displacement. Just curious to know, does this chaplain program play any part as far as connecting folks with the sources of agencies that are available for the gap until they're back on their feet?
So they don't, but we do. So as part of it, especially when we're on scene, like the fire we had in Yacht Cove, we immediately call Red Cross. We get them in touch with self-help or anything like that. So the chaplains don't play a role in that, but we as on-scene responders and all of our staff chiefs usually come in. We provide those services and get them through the first few days and get them connected to those agencies. So, yep. But they are available. They will respond to the scene if we have something and someone wants to talk to someone. We will coordinate if they have a specific religion they want. We'll do that coordination. If they don't really mind, we'll just have someone come out. But they're there for our members and for our victims and families. Annual compliance report was approved by the Commission for Public Safety Excellence. That is our annual compliance report for accreditation. So we updated the town's emergency operations plan, published new EMS protocol manual. That is our governing document for our paramedics. Our E911 Communications Center received training program certification. Our dispatch center is now one of 93 certified agencies and one of only 3 in South Carolina, and that's through the APCO. And we were awarded the Fire Safe South Carolina designation for the 4th year since its inception. So we're a fire safe community. Some of our capital improvement projects we completed, pretty heavy in fleet maintenance this year. So we got a new lift that will accommodate our larger ambulances, a new tire changing machine that allows us to service the tires on all of our vehicles. Previously, we had to use a third vendor for all of our bigger fire truck tires. We can now do all of that stuff in-house. And as always, every year we partner with the PSDs to install 2 new hydrants. This year, Squire Pope and Indian Pipe Lane. Some current initiatives, we're in the final stages of finding a new computer-aided dispatch system, which is our CAD, which is the machine that takes the call in, spits out who's supposed to go, and sends it all out to us. So that actually will be amazing for us. Station alerting is also in process. That is a partnership with Beaufort County. All departments within Beaufort County are getting station alerting. We're actually the only one that already has it, but ours is on the tail end. We've had it for 20 years. So we will be partnering with them through county monies, so none of that comes from us. The adoption and implementation of fire rescue's 2024 to 2026 strategic plan. As I told you, we'll bring forth to you next month. I will tell you our three big initiatives are going to be staffing development and community outreach. And our apparatus replacement, the pumpers and quints. So tentatively, it's been a long awaited arrival. We'll talk about that on the next slide. But in December, we're supposed to get our first 4 pumpers, January, the next 4 pumpers, and in March, our 2 quints. Fingers crossed. So, Councilman Brown, last time you asked me to not only come to you with all the good, but to come to you with the bad. So here's the bad. So on July 4th, unfortunately, Engine 1, which is one of our aerial devices or one of our quints, was involved in a collision on Pope Avenue. This is the truck, and we will probably never see this truck again. I will actually have our replacements before this is fixed. So tentatively, they can't get this in to be fixed until January, and it's probably 4 to 6 months to that. So we are without an aerial on the island. We have 3 on the island every day. Since July 4th, we've been running with 2. They are in a backup pumper, so still able to provide protection and everything. Our AC units in our ambulances, so there's one company that makes air conditioners for the patient compartment of an ambulance. It's called Dometic. So with the heat wave across the nation this year, a lot of those ACs that are just running overboard have gone out of service for whatever reason. So we keep 2 spares. Those 2 spares we have put in our frontline ambulances, and we're waiting on the other ones to get fixed. The company is telling us it's 3 to 6 months to get ACs. So that's one hiccup we're kind of running with right now. We do have a plan. If we can't get them, we're going to figure something out. But by state law, you cannot run an ambulance in the state without heat or air in the back of the patient compartment. So, so far so good. We've been able to kind of pillar and plumage from some other ones and got one back working. So that's definitely a challenge that we have right now and that we could see. And then just the continued delay in the apparatus replacement. So I will tell you that our tiller trucks are up for replacement in 2028. Our tiller trucks are refurb trucks. So they are 1980s fire apparatus that was sent to a vendor to refurb to make new like, and that's how we bought them previously. So those trucks are probably about $3 million a piece, but we don't feel we have a need for tiller trucks anymore. Our quints, our ladder trucks that we have out there every day are running the tightest neighborhoods in our community, and they can get around just fine. So our plan is to transition away from tiller trucks, which are a lot more expensive than a regular aerial, and replace them with regular aerial trucks like our quints. So we, right now, any aerial from any manufacturer is a 3-year build. So I'll just give you a heads up here first that I will be presenting to Mark for the next budget year to go ahead and replace, or at least have money set aside for our aerials. Fortunately for us, KME, which is our preferred vendor that we just got our other trucks from, they're spec trucks that they're building right now, which means they just build trucks, and when they come off the line, they just sell them to anyone. They're actually building 2 aerial trucks to our spec. So we're hoping that with the passing of the budget next year, we can go ahead and earmark those trucks to hopefully get in 2026, which will actually bring us up 2 years. So a little light at the end of the tunnel, hopefully there, but we will have a need for to replace those 2 trucks. Currently, the last 3 years, we've spent $465,000 just in repairs. So every time it seems that those ladders go up, something breaks. Last night on that fire, we put the aerial ladder up, and it broke. So maintenance was out there in the middle of the night fixing it to just get it down. Same thing on Saturday at the parade. It's just the hydraulics, all the lines, the electrical and everything, they're 40 years old now. So we constantly keep them up, and it's just a constant work in progress. But that is our big challenge right now, is keeping our aerials on the road. So with that, I ask if you guys have any questions. hate to end on a bad note, but
I wouldn't, can I respond to that? I wouldn't
Absolutely.
describe it as a bad note, Chief, and I appreciate you, bringing this information to us, okay? I can remember when, fire and rescue was not even a opponent of the town of Hilton Head, okay? And now here we are with a level of expectation. You guys are continuously, providing great service, but we have to understand as a policymaking group and also as a community is that comes at a cost.
Yeah.
Things happen, okay? And while it's great for us to tell the stories around the level of service, I think we need to also understand what it takes to get there, all right? So I appreciate you bringing these things to our attention. We're just more conscious as we look at our budgetary items going into our next fiscal. So I wouldn't consider it as bad. I look at it as opportunities, so thank you.
and I think that, I mean, I will tell you, we have been, we're very fiscally responsible, especially when it comes to our trucks. I mean, we could be building, I look around even our region and the trucks that they're building are crazy. They're nice, but it seems like a lot. We're very basic. We want smaller. We need stuff that fits our needs, but not at a crazy price point. So again, to the difference between a tiller and this truck right here, which is what we would be getting, you're looking at about $1 million difference per truck. So I mean, everyone loves tillers. We'll have no problem selling them because everyone is going to those, but it's not, to me, it's not fiscally responsible, and it doesn't serve our community any better to have anything like that.
What is a tiller versus,
So a tiller is a tractor-drawn aerial. It's the truck that you drive. You got like the tractor up front, but then you got the trailer, and then it's got the driver in the back. So the driver in the back steers the rear wheels, and it just gets you in tighter spaces. But other than that, there's zero functionality difference. The ladder's the same length, same amount of space. It's for tighter. It's like City of Charleston down on the peninsula. They need a tiller to get around down there. We thought we had those kind of streets, but we can get these trucks around just fine.
And to follow up, I don't see the previous slide as a negative either. Quite honestly, I think what it shows is great insight to all of the challenges that you have, the work that you do behind the scenes to make sure that you have whatever it is that you need will support. But we know and can see that your eyes are on that and knowing. And so I don't see it as a negative at all.
Well, and I thank you all. We have, I tell my people all the time, actually, I tell chiefs from all over the state and the country that we are very, very, very well supported by our town, by our council, by our community. So I couldn't imagine doing this job without that support. So I thank you a lot.
And Patsy, anything? Okay.
A couple,
Okay.
I remember my earlier question.
Oh,
Before that, you mentioned in your strategic plan staffing, and you've talked about the equipment just now and the upcoming budget. So I know that there were some additional staff members hired as a result of our last budget adoption. So I'm looking forward to whatever that request is. But I also wondered, you showed a slide that had the number of folks who live on Hilton Head, and sometimes that's a personal choice as to who wants to live where. I totally respect that. But I know that for sheriffs, we provide a housing subsidy. And so I'm wondering if there's also a need for a housing subsidy from fire and EMS staff, and if so.
It's something that we've always talked about, and we probably will continue to always talk about. Every time our class and comp studies come up, we talk about it. I don't know if there's a benefit to it. I know, most of my staff, with the exception of us two, live off island, and again, it's a choice. But I will tell you that we are with that strategic reassignment of the two captains and forming the community outreach. We are going to be actively looking for Hilton Head Island local applicants. So we are in the schools. We're in the high school. We're going to start in the middle. We're going to transition down to the middle school and start building this pipeline. We're going to have some kind of cadet program, however that looks, to try to get people that are born and raised here that want to come up and live and work on Hilton Head. So that is definitely something we're gearing for. But to be honest with you, someone moving from somewhere else, we're priced out of the housing market. Now, I think North Point is going to help, some stuff like that. So But just for someone to come in here, making, $52,000 a year, they can't afford to live on Hilton Head unless they have 2 or 3 roommates. So I don't know if it would, help. So, but I appreciate what has helped is our salary increases and our benefits that we do every year. I mean, we stay competitive with the area, so I think those things definitely help. So I appreciate that.
That communication line going. And my other question for you or for Deputy Chief is about code enforcement and having to do with short-term rentals with lots of bedrooms, like 6 or 7, or lots of beds. And so in thinking about, because this committee also is going to be looking at short-term rental regulation again, I think at some point after we get more data, and that is at what point does it move from being a single-family home to multifamily or a commercial or a business space, and you have to have sprinkler systems, a certain kind of smoke alarms installed? Is it by number of bedrooms, number of beds, and is there such a thing that makes it happen that way?
So that's a hard,
Apologize if I'm asking
it's a
you.
hard
You can
question.
come back later.
Because really I think some other communities have gone back to ask like what makes it the change of occupancy happen. And I don't know that in some of the talking to some other communities that are struggling with the same things with short-term rentals, that anybody has gotten a good, clear answer on that. Because generally, if you took a building and today you use it as a business, like, a sign shop, say, and tomorrow you make it into a restaurant, you're going to go through a change of occupancy because it's not being used in the same capacity that it was being used, and it has different code requirements. In the research that we have done, we haven't gotten a good definitive answer as to when it goes from, it's a house and you live in it to now you're using it for a commercial purpose, but it's still being used in the same capacity as a house. So it certainly is something that we can continue to work on and see if we can get some better answers on.
Hey, Madam Chair, I think we need to, I appreciate you've been looking at that. Thank you. I think it's a need in our community. We've seen some of those descriptions of places with triple bunk beds, 11 beds in one bedroom and one little window. Keeps me up at night.
Yeah.
So, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but the state views it as if it's built as a house, it's a house, it's a house, it's a house. So,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, the fire service has been working with the state to have, residential sprinkler ordinances and stuff like that put in, and it's just been a battle for.
It's very expensive, yeah.
And the home builders, they are the biggest
Lobbyists.
proponent to not have the sprinkler system because the codes the way that they are written require residential to have sprinklers. But when the state does the adoption of the residential code, they take out that section. So, sprinkler systems have come a long way, and depending on the size of the home, that plays into what type of system is needed. And, so for 2,000 square foot home, it really isn't that expensive. Because you can use your plumbing system. It's when you start to get into some of the bigger homes that it does become more expensive because they start to get looked at the commercial side and not in the residential side, so.
Based on square footage more than occupancy numbers.
It's square footage and height. It's and for us, a lot of our homes go up instead of out, so.
And we can't control those things, but what we can control is this last year, we've transitioned to, we have a single-family residential response for anything under.
Anything over 3,500 square feet, we send it as a commercial structure.
Which gets an additional engine. So every time we go to a business or a commercial structure, we have a response type. Anytime we go to a smaller home, we have another one. Well, those larger homes, we send the commercial response to, just because we know just the sheer magnitude.
And I'm just thinking on the prevention side, especially where we see these, I call them horror stories of occupancy, so, very much.
To that point, I think the floor area ratio that we've recently discussed will help out with some of that, but also, we don't have anyone here. It's those egress and ingress windows, right? So it's sometimes when spaces that weren't designed as a bedroom, which would require by building code a specific size egress, ingress window type, that's, I think, the missing element to some degree. All of this is important, but I didn't want to not mention that because we do see bedrooms being created everywhere in some instances. And also you mentioned floors, and I think that's important. We know that if you get above 3 floors, correct, then there's a requirement, as I understand it anyway, that there's a sprinkler system,
It's square footage and height.
square
So-
footage along with the height. And so when that extra floor is essentially open space with an elevator shaft or a small room, does that count too, or does it have to be a full? It's in the conversation, I don't want to.
Yeah, it's generally like living space.
Living space, so it's floor and living space, not just access. So many details that y'all deal with. So much of this is important. I do understand the interplay between community development and what makes it better for you, including how we design roads so that you can get those trucks back in there safely for the crew and to rescue the folks who need your help. Thank you for also, before I forget, and I'm going to close out if y'all are done, for the 9/11 Remembrance Celebration. Beautiful job, well done. Can't wait to look forward to see what you do next year. If you need our help with that, let us know.
We actually received a lot of good feedback from the community on it too. Ongoing every year thing, so. Have your anniversary in a couple years, so.
Thank you for that. Any other questions, anyone? Okay, we stand adjourned.